starting with Mr. Shaw.
Chuck Shaw, Karen Brill's appointee.
Faith Schulstrom, Frank Barbieri's appointee.
And I'm Karen Marcus Barbara McQuinn.
And Heather Frederick, I'm the Chief Financial Officer.
And our Zoom, there's no picture, so I can't see.
Right, so we have Mr. Smith, and who's a representative for Dr. Robinson. And then we have Pamela Buckman, principal representative, and Dr. Armas, also principal representative.
Great, thank you.
And they're going to turn on the screen so that you can also see them.
Okay. And I don't know if there's no one here, so I don't assume we have any public comment. Action items, Heather? We have to approve the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? There's a motion by Mr. Shaw.
Second.
Second by Ms. Schulstrom. Any discussion? All in favor, all opposed? Motion's unanimous. All right, discussion items, the FY23 budget development update.
Okay, so we're going to go over where we stand with the FY23 budget development. We are really ending the year as to where we stand, and the budget is basically balanced, but I'll go through what I mean by that. First, we had a update from the National Education Association of the state rankings of where we stand on state spending on education in the state of Florida. This is as of FY21, and I also gave each of you a packet. It was included in the agenda item, and I printed it out for you as well because there was a lot of interesting information in there. But we were thinking that when we had the increase in the teacher funding or the teacher salary, minimum salary to $47,500, that there might be the possibility that we would move up higher in the rankings when it came to funding nationwide. So in terms of the average teacher starting salary, we did move up to number 16. Our average teacher salary in the state of Florida is $44,000, but our per student spending, we still rank 44th. So we were previously 45th in the nation, so we just moved up just one spot to 44th in the nation. I thought it was interesting that you can see the compression issue that the teachers talk about when you look at because the average starting teacher salary, we're number 16th in the nation, let me clarify that. But when you look at the average teacher salary, we're number 48. So that goes to...
It's important to note both of those always.
Correct. And so raising it up to 47.5 did move us up on the starting teacher salary end, but it just proves the compression that we have with the teachers when you look at the average teacher salary. And then I just thought it was interesting that higher ed faculty staff, their average salary in the state of Florida, they actually ranked number 11. So it's almost $100,000. I wanted to just give a brief update on where we stand with our Esser Funds. It's important that we get and receive public feedback on how we're spending those funds. So we haven't received any specific feedback, but I had mentioned before we have been receiving some public requests, and a lot of the public requests are by the same constituents, but they haven't provided any feedback on any recommendations of how to change how the funding is being spent.
So public request meaning the residents, people in the county asking for information about it? Okay.
Right, asking for specific information of how the funds were budgeted, what are they budgeted on, so that we've provided the award and the budget that we submitted to Florida Department of Education. FDOE is going to be posting all of those award notifications on their website so the public can access them for all districts across the state. But when they're requested, we provide them as well, and we're going to add it to our website too.
Okay.
In June of 2021, how we thought we were going to use the Esser Funds has evolved pretty significantly. In the beginning, in June of 2021, we had planned to spend a lot more on facility projects, almost 20% of the total allocation of Esser Funds, and 7% on technology. And because we thought, there were additional computers and Wi-Fi and different devices. But fast forward to where we are today, we're not spending anything on facility projects. And it's not because we don't have projects, but we already had the projects planned within our regular 10-year capital budget, and we're using our sales tax funds. Sales tax has rebounded, so we do have enough funding within the capital project to fulfill all the promises made related to those capital projects. So we've shifted the facility projects into mostly disaster pay bonuses for employees, which is now about 13% of our planned use of the Esser funds. So initially, we weren't going to use any of it for disaster pay bonuses, and that was because we didn't think that that was the intention of the funds. But then after the state of Florida and the governor started utilizing their money, we started matching what the governor was doing at the state level. So that's the most significant change that we made with the Esser funds. And the bulk of it is really related to unfinished learning and closing the gap of the academic loss that those students had when they were out of school. Even though we were providing virtual teaching, it's really not the same as being face-to-face. And then the costs of COVID, just the additional costs that we've had in supplies and custodial costs in cleaning of the school, wipes, those costs continue, and I don't expect that they're going to decline as quickly as I had expected initially. At some point, I do think that they will level off, but at this point, they are still higher than what I had anticipated them to be at this point. We have the Student Academic Support Plan, and that provides a detailed overview of all the different programs we're offering, and then within the presentation, I also have in the appendix an overview of each of the programs, as well as a link to the Student Academic Support Plan, if you wanted to go back and reference that. So I already went through everything that we're spending the funds on, so cleaning, disaster pay, the unfinished learning, social, emotional, and mental health of the students. That has been a significant initiative. The students being home for so long, it has been beneficial, and we've seen an increase in the usage of the co-located services, as well as not only re-engaging the students to bring them back, but keeping them engaged and keeping them coming to school. And so that's been a priority as well. That was a priority from the state, and it's something that we expanded here within the district. So we're not just doing what the state mandated us, but we've also, we've grown that initiative. We are still spending money on technology, and that was state mandated, but we had already built technology into our capital budget. We were already 1-to-1 at the start of the pandemic. So that's why we didn't spend a lot of the money on technology like some of the other districts had to do nationally.
During COVID, when students were at home, they were provided with Chromebooks. Do they still have them at home to use if they need them?
They still have them. This is going to be the first year that we actually collect the devices back at the end of school and do an inventory of all of the devices. And something else that, we were very close to 1-to-1 when the pandemic started, but when we tried to estimate the breakage of the computers, that we significantly underestimated. So part of the technology and the budget that's within the technology is the repair of those computers, and then also being able to provide a pool of computers so that when there's a computer that's broken by a student, that we can give them a new one while their computer's being repaired. So that's something that we're working on now.
And the students who are working in the summer will have accessibility, can use them?
Let me see, I
In the
have the
summer
principals,
programs?
yep, I see Dr. Armas shaking his head, so yes, they will be able to.
Thank you.
So for FY22, I went over the budget in detail, this FFP sheets in our last meeting, so I'm going to fast forward to, for FY22, after the adjustment of the third calculation, because there was such an increase in the vouchers and the Family Empowerment Scholarship, our net district funding went down by $67 million. And the reason for that is the increase in the voucher program. It was also, part of this was already planned because DOE had held us harmless when we had the loss of enrollment of the 6,500 students. They held us harmless in 2021. So this was the first year that we saw the true impact of the loss of the revenue of those 6,500 students. For this year, we had a reduction of revenue of $67 million. And this was also just highlighting where we stood in terms of raises over the past 6 years to try to explain why we went into the FY22 year not expecting to give any raises. Because we did have such a reduction of enrollment, looking at salary increases across the state. There really were minimal recurring salary increases. Broward was one of the highest at 1%. St. John had an increase, a salary increase of over 3%, but they also had a growth of enrollment of over 7%. So when you have growth of enrollment, you have additional revenue. And Brevard also had, or Pinellas had an increase as well, but they had declining enrollment, but they made adjustments within their budget in terms of staffing and cutting staff in order to have a recurring increase of 3%. So in looking at the loss of revenue of $67 million, to look where we stand right now, we have the one-time money that I mentioned from the state where they held us harmless. So they let us keep $40 million more than what we had generated by using the Esser Funds or the CARES Act funds that the state had received to hold us harmless for FY21. So in FY22, we had a loss of revenue of $40 million, but we knew that was coming. We also had an additional categorical, a funding compression that we received in FY21, that it was the first year we received it. We didn't expect that it was something we were going to receive again, so we also set that aside. So if you take the $67 million, you back out those one-time revenues that we had from the previous year, we really had a loss that we were looking at of $16 million. We had an increase in the FRS contribution rate this year of $8 million. We had an increase in our FPL rate that was effective January 1st. The annualized impact is going to be a $6 million increase in our electricity bill, so it's $3 million for the first half of this year. And then I've added in our FY22 salary settlement. So initially we were not going to have, we went into the year thinking we would not be able to have recurring increases for employees. Our board really prioritized our employees, know how hard they work, and did push us a little bit to see if what we could find within the budget to provide these salary increases. We have built up our fund balance as a result of Esser. Our fund balance increased over $100 million from FY21 to FY22. So we have a lot of one-time money available that we can use. And we do believe that our enrollment is going to increase as well. So if we can see an increase of enrollment, that would help to offset the recurring salary increases that we receive. And if we don't, we do have enough one-time monies that we can utilize until we make those any reductions that we need to make within the budget. So I've added in the $38 million from the salary settlement. We've negotiated and settled now with CTA. We're waiting for ratification, the non-bargaining unit, as well as principals and APs. And we're working with SCIU, ASOP, and PBA. And hopefully those will be settled soon as well.
Heather, is that the salary settlement, the $38 million, does that include anticipated with SEIU and everybody?
Right, it includes everybody. It includes everybody at a 3.5% recurring increase for all bargaining groups. And then we did have savings because we had moved some staffing to Esser Funds in FY22. So for every allocation teacher that a school received that was over and above what they generated based on enrollment, we funded from Esser. We actually shifted to that federal grant because what we did was a step-down approach. We didn't remove all the teachers from the schools in 1 year. We had that reduction of 6,500 students from 20 to 21, but we only took 50% of the teachers. And then from 21 to 22, we didn't see an increase in enrollment. We were able to maintain our enrollment. We again only took 50% of the loss of teachers from the schools. So that 50% that we let them keep over and above what was generated, we funded from Esser. So that totaled $13.6 million in teacher units. We had an increase in our vacancy rate, so we had more teacher vacancies, we had more custodial vacancies, we had higher vacancy rates in a lot of our employee groups, so that over and above what we normally have, because we always have a planned vacancy rate, but we had $11.7 million more in vacancies than we normally do. And then we shifted also our summer program into the Esser Fund as well. So with that, we are looking at a projected really loss of $35 million, or a reduction in our fund balance. So we expected to have a reduction in our fund balance because we increased it by $100 million, so we did expect to dip into our fund balance. I do expect that that's going to be reduced further and offset further because we've had an increase in the categoricals at the school sites, for example, AP, IB, industry certifications. Because the schools have so much other money available to use within the Esser funds, they're not using the funds that's allocated them in the general fund. So they know that those funds are going to carry over. And so we're seeing those increase. So the carryovers are increasing because they have a lot of other stuff, other money to spend. So I do expect that that's going to decrease. And then also, we're waiting to hear back from the Florida Department of Education for our next revenue adjustment from the state. Normally, the revenue adjustment is not significant this late in the school year, but because of the vouchers, there was a way that DOE calculated the revenue where they didn't adjust the categoricals, and so they're going to go back and rerun the categoricals because there was such an increase in the voucher students that the districts didn't get credit for that increase in enrollment, and they weren't able to give me an estimate, but it potentially could be $1 million to $4 million more in revenue that we receive as part of that fourth calculation. So I'm hopeful it's going to be on the higher end, but they weren't able to even tell me how I could recalculate it. So I really just have to wait and see what it's going to look like. So I do expect that number to go down further.
What kind of discussions have you had at this point that when the Esser money, those grants go away, and if the vacancy rate goes significantly down, on the long-term impact where those dollars disappear?
We've had significant discussions to know that we would have to make those tough decisions at that point, and because we don't want to turn into a district where we're using one-time funds for recurring expenses. So that's why we're monitoring. That's why we're only doing 1 year. We initially wanted to go into the bargaining for this year since we were so late in the school year and negotiate for 2 years. But with the uncertainty with enrollment, we just weren't able to do that. So we're going to have to just wait and see what happens with enrollment, be hopeful that we see an increase, and that will help us to adjust whatever changes we may have to make going into the next year. So this is just showing the increase in our fund balance. We went from $210 million to $312 million. Fund balance is broken out into those 4 different categories. So the restricted category there is where all of the categoricals are that are state mandated. The AP, IB, adult ed is in the restricted category as well. So you can see we had pretty significant increase in the restricted because, like I said, the schools have had other funding sources to be able to utilize. And then really in that, the assigned area, that went up about $50 million. And as our revenue increases, we also have to continue to increase our board contingency.
Do you know how much do we have now in Florida Palm, and what kind of returns have we been getting on that? Do you know that offhand?
I don't have the amount, but they're minimal. But now with the increase in rates, we'll start to see an increase, but our investment returns have been minimal. But if anybody's going to get us the most money, it's Leanne Evans.
Leanne.
Enrollment, this is, I showed this at our last meeting. The blue bar are district-operated schools, orange are charter schools, gray is McKay, and yellow is Family Empowerment Scholarship. So you can see that we've had increasing enrollment for 10 years, for the most part. We've had pretty steady enrollment. So from 20 to 21, you see that drop of the 6,500 students, and we've been able to maintain where we were at. So we really haven't gained any ground, but we've been able to maintain. Charter schools has been pretty consistent as well. They're at 22,000 students right now, so they've been consistent. McKay, the little gray bar, that's consistent at about 1,500 students a year. But when you look at the yellow, the FES, that's what's most concerning, because you can see in 20 what a small little piece of sliver it was, and just the exponential increase from FY20 to FY22. Now, the state is saying that they don't expect the growth to be as significant in FY23 because they expanded the eligibility requirements during the 21 legislative session. So they feel that we saw that big spike this year because that's when they expanded the eligibility. I believe there's a lot of families out there that still don't even know that this is an option. And when you see the growth, it's not that we lost the students, because if you see, we maintained our students. And if you look at private schools really haven't had a huge spike either in enrollment. So just based on assumptions, and this is not something that I can prove, all it did was just add students into the pool that never would have been public school students to begin with. So that's something that we're going to monitor because it was a very significant increase. And when we projected our enrollment for the upcoming year, FY23, we projected a much more significant increase based on these trends with the Florida Department of Education. They denied our request, and because we requested over 3,000 additional students, they gave us 900 of the additional 3,000 we requested. It just concerns me that they're not going to forecast the proper enrollment statewide, which means that if enrollment ends up coming in higher than what they project with their FY23 budget, that they're going to take money away from us. And so we're waiting to see that. This is the concern with using one-time funds for recurring expenses. And it's best highlighted, unfortunately, by Hillsborough County School District. So they're the school district they're the purple line there. They at one point had the highest fund balance in the state. They were the envy of all of the districts in the state. We all looked to Hillsborough County School District. And now you can see from 2018 to the current year, they went from being the highest to having the lowest fund balance of all school districts. And a lot of that was because they continued to use recurring expenses for one-time funds. So we know that's a risk, and that's something that we're going to continue to monitor to make sure that we never put the district in the same position as what happened in Hillsborough County. It definitely is a lesson learned for all of us. DOE, to your point, Mr. Shaw, of the Esser Funds and that these Esser Funds are going away, DOE has the same concern. So they issued a letter on February of this year, so just a couple months ago. It seems like it was a year ago, but it was just a couple months ago, saying that they were concerned of all the districts putting recurring funds into these Esser dollars and making sure that you have a plan for when these funds are eliminated. And so I have just a summary of just some of the costs that are just increased costs because of COVID. So they're not costs that we had previously. Our health claims have gone up by $20 million. You'll see a slide, but we would expect that hopefully those will level off as well. So we're looking at potentially just an increase in our health claims of at least $10 million a year just as a result of COVID. Summer school, we expanded our summer school from $5 million to $10 million. So if we want to continue that, that's an additional $5 million. The increase in our COVID supplies, so the wipes that we buy for the schools, the additional cleaning detergents we buy for the schools, the Clorox 360 machines and the detergents that go into that. We're still going to need certain masks and gloves just for dealing with for certain situations. So I expect that the COVID supplies are going to just be higher, or our custodial supplies are going to be higher just on an ongoing basis because it's a new standard. We've implemented some new initiatives like 24/7 tutoring. That costs $3 million a year. So if that's something we wanted to continue, that's something we would have to cut or make changes to absorb. We've expanded our co-located services. We've purchased HEPA filters for all of our classrooms. They cost $6 million. Well, it costs almost $3 million a year to just replace the filters for those. Health screening tests. So we purchased devices for the health clinic where they can screen students not only for COVID but also flu and potentially other types of illnesses and diseases. So we could spend up to $2 million on health screening tests. And so all of these costs total $32 million, and these are just all new costs. These are not even costs that we put into the Esser grant. So it is definitely a concern and something that we will monitor very closely. So looking at FY23, I already went through the financial related legislative update. I went over these slides in our last meeting. But the Senate Bill 2524, that was a very large conforming bill. We call it a train bill that came in at the last minute that had a whole bunch of stuff in it. A lot of it doesn't even relate to each other. But there was one item in there related to compensation to teachers and how supplements are calculated that we're looking into. And it also did add some flexibility in the reading categorical, whereas the low 300 schools in the past, we had to offer an extended day. We were mandated to offer an extended day. That's no longer a requirement. It's something that's allowed, but it's an allowable cost but it's just now one of many options. We are going to continue it with our schools for next year. We're not going to stop it, but that might be something that we would look at in the future. And then there were a couple bills on charter schools. So there's now a charter school review commission that will review applications and will approve applications. The charter schools, if approved, would still be the responsibility of the district for oversight purposes. We would have the ability to appeal, although I don't think that many of those appeals would be granted. And then there was also changes to campaign financing where it limits the ability of the district to communicate with constituents regarding referendums, on providing certain printed material. So it is going to be more difficult when we communicate about the referendum. And the referendum is very important. It's something that we have to get approved by the voters every 4 years. It represents $225 million in this current fiscal year. In FY23, based on the increase in property values, I anticipated it will total $240 million. We do share that now with charter schools, but it's 10%, over 10% of our district budget, and it's very important we maintain it. It funds over 750 teachers, fine art teachers, art, music, PE, choice, and career academy teachers. We provide retention supplements to over 12,000 teachers based on years of service. We provide additional mental health staff, a behavioral mental health position at every single school, as well as additional security too. So it's important that we maintain that referendum. There was an increase in the base student allocation. a pretty significant increase in the base student allocation of $214. But the legislature included in there that we are mandated to increase our minimum pay to $15 per hour by October 1st of this year, of 2022. We were very surprised and happy to see that, because it was already a mandate by the voters that we increase to $15 an hour by, I believe, 2027. And so that was an unfunded mandate. So now we were very, like I said, we were very thankful to see that that was not only funded, but it was funded early, because we are having such challenges hiring staff that this will help. So for example, our custodians, a beginning custodian makes $11.09. So we will be able to increase them to $15 an hour. We did not have the impact of, FEFP was not reduced by the Putting Parents First adjustment of $200 million. Initially, our district was potentially going to lose $28 million. Instead, what the legislature did is they set the $200 million aside in school recognition, which they have not funded the last 2 years. And they're saying that all districts that they feel didn't comply with the mask mandate is not eligible for the $200 million. Mr. Smith, you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly on the $15 an hour. I'm not aware of the bus drivers' base salary. Would that mean that they get an increase?
They're already above $15 per hour.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so that was an initiative that we did, I want to say 5 years ago, to increase all the bus drivers. So their base is, I want to say, I don't know the exact amount, but I believe it's about $15.29 or $15.30, but I can get back to you with the exact amount.
Okay, thank you.
But they're already above the 15. So in addition to funding the $15 per hour increase, so that impacts a lot of our non-instructional staff, they also funded the teacher compensation categorical, where they increased that $250 million. So the legislature was recognizing not only the teachers, but also the non-instructional staff as well. So we were expecting it was going to be one or the other, so that's why we were very pleased to see that they recognized both. But they also increased the FRS rate 1%, and that has a pretty significant increase to us. That's an increase of $10 million. The cost of increasing all of our employee groups to $15 per hour, just in our general fund, is $12.1 million. When you add in the special revenue fund, which is primarily food service, all the food service workers were at another $4.1 million. So nearly $17 million increase in order to raise everybody to $15 per hour. And you can see the groups that are most significantly impacted, ASOP and the FPSU group. So the FPSU group, it's primarily the custodians, because we do have so many custodians across our district. The community language facilitators are in that group, paraprofessionals. And now I'm mixing the two groups together because some of those would cross groups with ASOP. And so I went into detail with the FEFP budget, the 23 budget, in our last meeting. So I was going to fast forward towards the end. We're looking at an increase in enrollment countywide of 3,800 students, 3,796. Of that, though, we expect an increase in district-operated schools of only 361. Hoping that number is low and that it's actually going to be higher, but right now we're looking at an increase of 361. Charter schools, we're expecting an increase of 1,000, and within the Family Empowerment Scholarship, we're expecting an increase of almost 2,500 students. And that's still below, if you were to trend it out, that's still below the trend that we had in growth from the previous year. So even though our enrollment is increasing, countywide by 3,800, really, and for our district schools, we're looking at an increase of about 360 students. But based on the increase in the base student allocation and some of the categoricals, our increase in funding is $68 million. So $68 million is a lot of money. But when we break it down to see what we have available, our increase in the Florida retirement contribution is $10 million. We have the increase in the teacher compensation. If we break out their portion related to the categorical, that's for district-operated schools, that's $14.7 million. The increase in the hourly rate, and this is just for the general fund, is $12.1 million. Because we have that increase in revenue, we're going to have to increase our contingency reserve to remain in compliance with the board policy. We're going to have to recognize a full year of increase for FPL, so an additional $3 million. And then when you look at our staffing, it doesn't seem to align with the increase in the enrollment that we have of 360 students. So we do have a new school, Blue Lake, so we have all the administrative costs for that new school, so that represents $550,000 approximately. The increase in enrollment, so that increase in enrollment of 360 students, that excuse me, represents an increase in enrollment of an increase in staffing of $850,000. Let me just get a glass of water.
I'll get it for you. You keep talking.
Of $850,000 in additional teacher staff, teachers, paraprofessionals. And then when you look at the increase in ESC and ESOL, it looks like it's a significant growth in students. It's actually not a growth in students. It was just more students were identified within the district between the time that we started the school year in FY22 versus the time that we pulled the information for allocation purposes. Thank you.
I got you a big cup.
So because of
Did
COVID.
you set new benchmarks, or?
Not new benchmarks, but it was taking us longer to get testing done, and we had a backlog because of COVID, and so it just took longer to work through the identification piece. So it wasn't that they weren't receiving the services, they were. All of those staffing had been moved into the Esser Funds, so we hadn't eliminated any of the staffing. It was just being funded from the federal grant. So all this is really a shift from it being funded from the Esser grant and moving those positions back into the general fund. Because as of count day, they were not generated, that 11th day of school. They weren't generated because they weren't technically identified at that time. But when we pull staffing for enrollment purposes, or when we pull the enrollment for staffing allocation purposes, we pull the enrollment, we pulled it as of the end of February. And so that gave them, the schools that additional time to identify all of those students. But like I said, they were still receiving the services, the schools still had the staff, now it's just shifting from where it was funded. So instead of, like I mentioned, there was $14 million almost that we were funding of additional resources in the Esser Fund. We now pulled back $6.9 million of that into the general fund. So the total impact of all of those items is $24 million. So that gives us a projected surplus of $44 million, but then we also have to take out the amount set aside for the teacher compensation, as well as increasing the hourly rate to $15 per hour. So that leaves us $17 million. We are still working through increases in departments. We have told departments that we didn't expect to have any increases. So we've gone through almost all the meetings. Our last set of meetings are tomorrow. But we have had some that have just increased costs just because of inflation, and so those right now are the only minor increases that we're expecting for next year. So they're not incorporated into the forecast, but they're well within what's available. And I wanted to highlight our health insurance program. This is in 22 was the 9th year that we did not have a premium increase for our high option plan, and the 10th year we haven't had a premium increase for our low option HMO plan. And that really is unprecedented. I think if you compare us across the country, it's something to be extremely proud of. We have made plan design changes. So there were changes that we did make within the plan. We have a very collaborative relationship with the unions. But to be able to say that we haven't increased our premiums, and our premiums are also some of the lowest in the state when you compare us as well. If you participate in the wellness program, you can have free insurance, and then also for an employee who covers their family, it's $250 a month. And there are districts, Broward schools is almost $1,000 a month, I believe, when you have dependents. So we're very fortunate that we've been able to maintain our health premiums. With that being said, because of COVID, we've had a pretty significant increase in our health claims. And so our actuary, which is Gallagher, they are recommending for the 23 year, which is based on the calendar year, that we increase our premiums by 20%. Our plan has outperformed the national trends for the last 10 years. When you look at our health claims, we were averaging 2 to 3% when the national increase was 5 to 7%. And so we're not ready at this point to increase our premiums. So we're now working, we've met with the unions, we've shown them where we stand. The blue bar on this chart are the medical claims. The orange are the pharmacy claims, so all of the prescriptions. The yellow line at the top is our revenue, so that's all of our premiums, so that you can see that our revenue has exceeded or matched our expenses through a calendar year 20. And it was in calendar year 2021 where it was the first year that we we exceeded our premiums by $20 million. There were a lot of people that didn't have access, weren't able to get a lot of treatments in calendar year 20, so that's why we believe that there was more of a spike in 2021. So we want to take a wait-and-see approach and monitor our health claims through calendar year 2022. We also want to look at making some plan design changes, and if we continue to see that there's an increase in claims, then we'll have to, that goes beyond what our premiums are, then we'll have to look at increasing our premiums. But we also saw that, with fewer employees, more vacancies, we're collecting fewer in premiums, although our claims are increasing at the same time. So we're analyzing the claims to see if they're just higher dollar claims, or if it's just more claims that just has been pent up demand, and that's the issue. So we just needed some more time before we make adjustments. We do have a built-up fund balance within our health fund, so we have the ability, like we do within our general fund, to take the time to make sure that we're actually seeing a true increase in claims, and that it's not just because of COVID, and it's something that's not going to continue. But wanted to highlight it to the committee because potentially we are looking at an increase in our health premiums, both for districts, staff, but both for the district as well as employees.
Heather, before you leave this one, what impact did, during the last couple of years of people leaving and the payouts that we did for vacation and sick leave, was that a significant increase, or did it?
No, it's not. That's not reflected on this slide.
Right.
This is just healthcare, but for it not more than what we budgeted.
Oh, okay.
So we do, but we had been budgeting, we budget the same amount, and it's been less. And so now we were at the budgeted amount. So I would say it was about $2 million more per year.
But it was already budgeted.
But it was already budgeted for. Which I expected it to be higher. There's certain things you expect, and it just doesn't come to fruition. So it is interesting. And when we're looking at the average salary, and there's different components that go into building the average salary, it's always interesting to see what actually happens with those trends. This just shows puts dollar amounts on that chart. So looking at plan year 21, you can see that we had a loss of $13 million. In plan year 22, we had there's a projected loss, if what the actuary assumed is correct, of $20 million. And then at that point, it just gets exponential, that then we would have a loss of $45 million going into 2023. Our actuary is very conservative. We've been using him for years. And like I said, we've always been well below the national trends. If we had gone with his recommendations every year, we would have been increasing our premiums every year. And like I said, there's a 60-day requirement from the state that we have 60 days set aside in reserve to cover the claims. And we had, at one point, 157 days, so well above what the state mandated and required. So even going into plan year 22, even if that does come into fruition, we would still have 90 days available within our reserve, which does exceed the state requirement. So we do have the ability to kind of, like I said, take that wait and see approach before we make increases. But we want to do it sooner rather than later with the adjustments within the plan design changes to try to reduce whatever that loss may be.
And have you notified the bargaining units that or you're
We did,
working with
yes. So
them?
we already had our first meeting with them, and we all agreed that's the approach we're going to take. And we're going to monitor, we're going to send them reports on a monthly basis. We're going to meet quarterly with them to go over what the actual health claims are, comparing them to the prior year, both pre-COVID as well as post-COVID, to see if we start to see the trend decline. But we also brought up looking at recommended plan design changes as well with them. So we'll walk through those in more detail with our next meeting. But we did already approach it with them. And I think they understand and do value as much as they can that we haven't had an increase in 10 years, which is unheard of. So in FY22, our fund balance is expected to decrease because of the salary settlements, but it's not going to decrease as much as the salary settlements because we do have some other revenues and increases in some of those restricted categoricals that are going to help offset that increase. We know that it's important that we continue to monitor our enrollment to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position like Hillsborough County Schools where we're using recurring one-time funds to pay for recurring expenses. So that is going to be our priority, and we will monitor and we will make adjustments as needed. We will be monitoring the 11-day count very closely and making and aligning the staffing based on enrollment because we have, like I said, used that step-down approach for the last 2 years. And so now this is the year that we're going to truly align staffing. But hopefully we're going to see an increase higher than the 360 students that's projected. And we do continue to have challenges, just highlighting to the committee again, the importance of renewing our operating millage of the 1 mil. That will be going to the voters in November. The superintendent presented at the county commission on Tuesday. It was very well received by the county commission. So this year represents $225 million. In FY23, based on the property tax values, it's estimated at $240 million, and we do share that with charter schools. But at over 10% of our budget, it's very important that get renewed, and impacts, like I said, over 750 teachers, as well as additional mental health professionals at the school sites, and then over 12,000 teachers are receiving retention supplements related to those funds as well.
Did the commission happen to mention to you 2 other bond issues that potentially could be on the November ballot?
They did mention some additional initiatives.
Right, okay. And on the 26-27 extension of the surtax, I think you all are hoping that happens, correct?
Yes, we are going to go forward with that. And
But you can't go without the county.
we could go on our own.
Okay. You might want to think that strategy, because they have other stuff that they're talking about.
Yes, that they have not made a decision one way or the other, and they have different options they had several different proposals that were on the table, and they haven't made any final decisions. So we actually, for what's on the ballot, we actually presented to them prior to them making any decisions as to what they're going to be putting on the ballot.
For 26, 27?
No, for the November election.
Yeah, they've been talking about those two other bond issues for a while. They're just still sort of making sausage with it. But on the 26, 27 one, just so you're prepared, there's, that they haven't publicly really talked about, but there's other things they're interested in.
And
Transportation,
and-
which is a different structure is from this.
And we have heard that too, and whether, and the timing of when those would be going to the voters as well. And so that is definitely something that we're considering, because we definitely need to continue it. And with sales tax collections being higher than what was anticipated, even after the big dip that we had, we more than rebounded, and then some. We are going to end that program early. We're going to be able to collect the funds prior to the 10 years.
So have we seen any increase in retention of teachers related to this bond issue, or?
I would say it's difficult to say, just because of the impact of COVID, and just because looking at the great resignation that we've had across the country in all positions, teachers being one of them, that people are just tired. And, so it's hard to say. I believe that we've been able to retain more teachers than others, but it's just,
But you
COVID
can't
is an
really tell.
anomaly it's
Sure.
hard to account for.
I think it's like in any other profession, you need to start targeting your new ones. You've got that teacher initiative from students now for recruiting, getting them in the system now, getting them committed. I think that's gonna have to be funded and primarily focused, because
They're looking at the Grow Your Own program, initiatives of actually paying those that want to intern at the district. And we've done that with the school psychologists, and that has helped to fill those positions. And then hopefully we retain them after their internship. So they are trying to, on the HR side, look at out-of-the-box ideas to figure out how to keep keep the teachers, not only keep them, but hire in more. Our director of recruitment was in Puerto Rico recently. We've also have a proposal or a contract with a firm to bring in teachers internationally as well. And then we highlighted which languages, we were able to say which languages were a priority for our district. It's nice to have a bilingual staff, even if it's not an ESOL class, just to be able to communicate with the students. And so we are looking on a lot of different initiatives.
but it's a good way to provide the kids coming out of school with opportunities for jobs down the road, and training them and getting them interested in doing it. I mean, it's not just teaching, I think it's nursing, it's everywhere. It's been a tough couple of years, and it's like, we gotta go to that generation and get them all, excited about it. So hopefully, I mean, I appreciate the getting them from elsewhere, but I think also really need to focus on I personally think we need to focus on our own kids. And if they're going to be there and they're going to be teachers, we need to cheer them on and get them in there, because that's what's going to be our next generation.
Because there are fewer going into the profession, even into college, so that's why we are, but it's going to take time for that pipeline, for us to actually realize the impact of that pipeline, because we're going into starting an elementary school, I believe Dr. Sheffield said when she was here in her last meeting.
And it's important to be judicious in the hiring, that we can retain teachers, but you want to retain the best teachers too, the people that you want to have.
Yes,
I mean, I have a grandson who's graduating this year, and he wants to be a teacher, but he's not in the right program, so there's no, like, okay, anybody here want to be a teacher? There's not, so a little, maybe more outreach like that, so, but.
Okay, and so I can definitely pass that along to the
They
HR.
should, personally, I think they should do it across the board to all the seniors who, I don't care what career program you're in, hey, anybody thinking about this, maybe a specialty in what their program is, or just a regular student, but there's no niche for him, because he's not in a teaching magnet, whatever they have.
It may be this may be a good year that the legislative platform for next year include changes to make it easier to recruit teachers by looking at some of the certification and requirements. Because I know that's had a big impact on people getting in the field.
It has, yeah, because, yes, I know it's difficult for some with the certifications.
I may have missed it on one of the slides. What was the increase in the tax roll this year?
The increase in the tax
Seeing
roll is
any-
7%, but you know that even though the increase in the taxes is 7%, here I have it, yeah, 7.42%, we don't actually see an increase of 7% in our funding. The increase in our funding is tied to whatever the legislature will give us. So we have an increase in per student funding of 5%. And that's because the legislature did not roll back our required local effort, or at least not significantly. They maintained it. And so that helped for them to be able to fund those other initiatives, which was raising the $15 per hour, as well as funding an increase for teachers.
There was no change in the DCD or anything?
It went up slightly. It's from 0.0424 to 0.0438. So it did go up just a little bit. I'm good with a little increase, I just don't want a decrease. And looking at our, our most significant increases were in our DCD, as well as the teacher compensation program, or the BSA, as well as the teacher compensation program. And the proration to available state funds that you see in the third calculation, there was an increase of 12 million and a decrease of 12 million. That's because in the FY22 FEFP, the legislature set aside a reserve for a growth of enrollment beyond what they projected. This year in 23, there's no reserve set aside. So if the vouchers end up growing a lot more than what the state had anticipated, we could potentially see a decrease in our funding of possibly $12 million. There originally was a reserve set aside, but then when they set that $200 million aside in the school recognition program, they eliminated the reserve, and they also reduced the BSA slightly too. So even though we weren't technically impacted by it, we were, and we're not getting it back either, because at this point we're not eligible to participate in the school recognition program, even though it's for high-performing schools and employees. It doesn't matter. They're going to be penalized, which is it's not fair. So our tentative budget adoption is August 3rd. It's the absolute last day we can do it per the calendar, and then final budget adoption is September 7th. So our next meeting would be going over our report to the board. And so and that is scheduled for,
June 23rd.
Yeah. And so if everybody is available on that day, let's see, or June 16th. We have June 16th or June 23rd. And so I have 2 days set aside. I'll send out a draft to the committee prior to that meeting. And then if you have any questions or concerns, let me know. And like I said, I provided, and it's attached to the agenda item, but I also printed it out to you, the rankings that include all the states. I thought it was very interesting, so it's good to flip through.
Will we not be seeing the capital budget, and you said that the office budgets, department budgets were just inflationary. There's no
Right.
personnel or major things.
Nothing major, because it's going to be shifting costs around. Like, we were able to utilize temp services. Now those temp services are being eliminated because they're not able to meet the need. So then we're going to have to add staffing to offset that. Some inflationary cost increases. The capital budget, we went through that. I have to go back to see which meeting that was at. But the capital budget is
Nothing new since we looked at it.
nothing new since then. So if they're going to be presenting the capital budget at the June 1st budget workshop is the plan. So then I would be able to run through any changes at the next meeting that we have. But the board approves a 10-year capital plan. So that's always the starting point with some minor changes. And we went over during that meeting, Ms. Evans went through, what we were kind of looking at for changes, but nothing significant. Moving up some projects, like moving up painting projects, moving up some roofing, we're continuing to do HVAC. We have 2 new schools. We had 1 new school open this year. We're going to have 2 new schools open in the upcoming year, meaning in '24. So we've already added the principals out there. They're already working on ordering the furniture and getting ready for those 2 new schools. And it's been a long time since we opened a new school, brand new school. And so that was fun for us when Blue Lake opened this past year.
Have we had much success in taking care of some of the life safety issues that have been building over years? Do you have any information on that?
We were doing well with responding to those. I can send out, it's something that's reported to the board on a routine basis, and so I can go back and look at the last report that they sent. I remember the last time that I looked at it, it's something that the Auditor General looks at as well. They were doing a good job catching up on that. We're doing the operational audit right now with the Auditor General, and I know that that's going to be one of the areas that they look at. But sometimes with staffing, that's been the challenge. When we have fewer staff, they then have to prioritize what they're working on. So it is possible that we've seen a little bit of an uptick just because they've had to divert staff. But they always focus on those that are high priority. And that was a recommendation that came from the Auditor General. You can't fix all of them, so prioritize them. And a lot of those life safety ones, some of them they're not really that. Goodness, I had a life safety issue because the kickboard behind my desk was a little loose. I'm like, but I'm not going to be walking behind my desk. So they prioritize them to make sure that the staff are being utilized in those that are the really, truly health safety issues.
So I understand from things statewide, referendums have been approved in other school districts. Do you know of any that the district did not get it approved? Because all the ones I heard about, that they were approved by pretty significant numbers.
I do believe that they were all approved, but for some reason I was thinking that there was one that was pretty close.
Okay.
So I'll research that.
At least the trend is in the positive.
The trend is in the positive. The trend is in the positive, and our last referendum was supported with 72% approval for our operating millage. And so we're very proud of that. We're very proud to have the support of our community. And I think that, having our oversight committees that we have the Independent Referendum Oversight Committee for the operating millage. We have the Sales Surtax Advisory Committee that monitors and oversees the sales tax proceeds. We've always been known, promises made, promises kept. We're very transparent in how we spend our funds. And the community, I think, understands and respects that transparency. And so we hope to continue to have their support. They know that the teachers are very important. This funds a significant amount of teachers for the school sites, and it's just important that we maintain that funding.
I think the biggest challenge is going to be for the board to realize the impact when these one-time sources of funds go away, and what kind of real impact that has.
I agree with you. And it's something that I just have to make sure to keep telling them every single meeting that I have. And they understand that. The board truly does understand what it means for the one-time funds, and that's why we're monitoring everything that we need to monitor so that we can make changes in a timely manner. We have enough fund balance built up that we have enough time to make those adjustments and make them slowly rather than reductions all at one time.
I think at every workshop you do, you need to show that slide with the purple line in Hillsborough.
I will do that. And I'll add your name on there.
I requested that.
I will do
Absolutely,
that.
because that really, really is a serious issue.
I know it's unfortunate that a district had to go through that for all the other districts to realize.
It's just common sense, and I know that the same conversation has happened at the county level, where they're like, you can't, they've done some of the same things the district has done, but with the understanding that's not going to be there next year. So, yeah.
But it's always hard, once it's in the budget, to give it up.
Yep.
And so we did try to, when we were working with the Esser Funds, the positions that we had, we didn't add more positions than we knew we could reabsorb into our budget. We have normal attrition every year of 1,000 teachers. We added 370. We can easily move those positions back into the general fund without eliminating any staff. So we tried to be very strategic, but there's always going to be some things that are new initiatives that people want to keep.
And that's why it's hard, because your initiatives are for things that are important, and they make a difference in people's lives. So, you know, it's good to be strategic, but it's also good to recognize the importance of those items and continue to seek ways to accomplish the things you need for kids and teachers.
I
You're-
couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir.
Preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, and
so.
let's try to get those kids back. That's what's most important. Let's get them back into district-operated schools. We offer such wonderful, amazing opportunities in our school sites, and we need to do a better job marketing what we provide.
Yep. All right, if there's nothing else,
That's it.
for any other questions or anything, everybody, thank you very much, and
Thank you. And I just noticed that Ms. Andrews joined the call. I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you sooner. So thank you, Ms. Andrews, for joining the committee.
yes, thank you very much. All right, with nothing else, we are adjourned, or whatever we are.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.